Well, good morning and welcome to Agile EQ on Catalyst. I'm really excited about this session today because the Agile EQ profile is actually my favorite DiSC profile. I absolutely love it. And I have used it with clients. It's had a really big impact on them. And I can talk more about that as we go through. So the other thing that's really great about the Agile EQ profile is that it's absolutely suitable for everyone in the organization. Unlike, say, the management profile or the work of leaders profile, which are targeted at specific people, Agile EQ, like the workplace profile, is aimed at everyone. All right. And in actual fact, it's the perfect follow on to workplace profile. So let's have a look at this. In my Catalyst profile, as you can see, it says right up front, I have an SI style. If there's anyone on this call who's not familiar with Catalyst, Catalyst is an online platform where you actually take your profile online and you see your profile online. In fact, as soon as you complete taking the profile, you will see what I see on the screen now about my profile. And you can see where my dot sits. I'm an SI style. And then underneath that, we have some tools, all right? Before we go to the tools, if you are familiar with Catalyst, but you haven't been in there for a little while, you may not be familiar with the menu on the left. That's a new navigation menu that's been added just in the last couple of weeks, I think. And it replaces the hamburger menu, which used to be up in the top right-hand corner. There's also an option down here to shrink that. So you've got a bigger screen to focus on. So the tools that are available in Catalyst at the moment are Discover WorkSmart. WorkSmart is the tool. It's 5 management applications, and I'm not going to go into these things today. You can, if you don't know about these things and you'd like more, well, then contact us and we can fill you in, because we need to really focus on Agile EQ today. So Compare a Colleague is available to everybody. Build a Group is available to everybody, and Get Advice is available to everybody. So they're tools that Wiley have added. And these have all been added progressively over time. So Get Advice is only a few months old, all right, whereas groups might be coming up 12 months old, I think. Compare to a Colleague has been there since we got Catalyst and right at the very beginning. Okay. WorkSmart is only this year. Okay, so down below that, if I scroll down, we'll see the 3 profiles that are built into Catalyst. All right, Workplace, Management Profile, and Agile EQ. Underneath that, you'll see Discology, and that's where you can go to find out anything you need to know about DiSC, history, theory, etc. Okay, and dive into the details if you want to do that. So I'm going to dive straight into the Agile EQ profile, because that's what we're here to talk about today. And of course, talking about EQ, it's emotional intelligence, and the definition there of emotional intelligence is the ability to adapt to any situation, to respond more effectively to different kinds of situations. Okay, so what is EQ? It's about reading the emotional and interpersonal needs of a situation and responding accordingly. Okay, all right, so if I go into what is EQ, this is the first section in the profile. And there's also a facilitation kit with facilitation materials. And the facilitation materials are there for you to do as classroom facilitation or online virtual facilitation, if you wish. I'm going to start with the EQ principles, because this is something that I think some people are not aware of or have been taught differently. Your EQ is not a fixed score or measurement, all right? With time and practice, anyone can enhance their EQ, okay? And so that's why we have an Agile EQ profile, so we can become more agile in using our emotional intelligence strengths, okay? There are different ways to be emotionally intelligent. Some will come naturally to you, while others may be more of a stretch. And no DiSC style is inherently more emotionally intelligent than any other, all right? Now, most times you go into looking at something about EQ, you will see Daniel Goleman's work. And initially 4 competencies, he added 5, 5th one was spit out motivation. from self-awareness. That's not what we're going to be talking about here. I will talk about it in the sense that how this profile enhances those competencies, okay, as we go through. And so the other thing I'd like to mention here is that unlike most other EQ assessments, Agile EQ is not measuring whether you are high or low on emotional intelligence, all right? It's actually measuring your strengths, your emotional intelligence strengths, and those that are related to your DiSC style, okay? So let's go down to the introduction. And I've got a short little video here. It only runs for about 3 minutes, but I think it's really worth showing you to introduce you to the Agile EQ profile.
In some ways, emotional intelligence is really a kind of problem solving. Each time you face a challenging situation, your EQ can help you determine the best action to take. For example, here's Ava. She's in a meeting, struggling to get a word in as her more outspoken colleagues dominate the conversation. She has questions and ideas to express, but she's not sure how to make that happen. So Ava does what she normally does. She waits for pauses, and when there are none, she pretty much keeps her thoughts to herself. So imagine how she feels a few days later when her boss wants to know why the team hasn't thought through the exact issues Ava wanted to bring up. Let's rewind back to the meeting. What went wrong? Did Ava miss an opportunity? Because the truth is that she has lots of options right now. Like, she could ask the team to slow down so more voices can be heard, even if she has to interrupt someone else to do it. She could suggest the meeting organizer schedule more time. She could send out an email with her thoughts. There are many different ways for her to handle the situation. But of course, Ava's like most of us, which means there are a couple things that sometimes keep her from making the best possible choice. First, she probably doesn't actually see all those options. In fact, most of them never occur to her. And second, among the possibilities she does see, there are really only a couple that feel comfortable and familiar enough for her to really consider. And so, because she has unconsciously limited her choices like this, she doesn't handle the situation as effectively as she could. Developing your emotional intelligence allows you to do the opposite. It makes you agile. It opens your mind up to a wide variety of options. And then, just as importantly, it helps you push yourself to act on the best option, even if it's less comfortable. And here's where the mindsets come in. These are your options. Some of them are so natural for you that they become habits. They can be a source of strength, but they can also lock you in and limit your agility. For example, maybe it causes you to give someone a third and fourth chance when a tougher approach makes more sense, or to be assertive when really a gentle touch would be more effective. One of the most crucial steps in building your emotional intelligence, then, is learning to recognize the mindsets that fall outside your comfort zone and truly seeing the value, the flexibility, and the freedom they offer.
Okay, so as you can see, the profile is about mindsets. And one of the valuable things about this profile in terms of increasing self-awareness is helping people be more aware of what their natural mindsets are. We'll go into those. And this is the model that the profile is based around. As you can see, there is a mindset for each of the 8 scales. I'm going to scroll down and have a look at each of those. We're going to start with the resolute mindset. So the resolute mindset is people going into situations being ready and prepared to stand their ground in the face of opposition, of being ready to speak up about problems and ready to push through any resistance that comes up. All right, that's why it's a mindset, because people go into situations with that mindset. All right, those of you who are not anywhere near the DiSC scale, where irresolute mindset sits, might look at that and say, well, gee, I'm not really going into situations ready for that. No, well, let's look at the next one, which is the self-assured mindset for the D style. Okay, so the D style people go into situations ready to assert their opinions and rights, project confidence in their ideas, and also being ready to take charge of situations. And we're going to look at why we use these mindsets in just a moment. But that's the value of this profile, is understanding what are my mindsets, and we'll get to that in a moment. So the dynamic mindset is the DI scale, initiating action. So people are going into situations ready to do that, all right? Ready to influence people and project a strong social presence. The I style goes into situations ready to establish and maintain relationships. That's what they're looking to do. That's where their mind is focused, and expressing their emotions, and often expressing unfiltered thoughts to others. They just shoot from the hip in a sense. Okay, we know that about I style people, don't we? The empathizing mindset, which is the one that I'm strongest in, is going into situations ready to reach out with compassion, going into situations seeking to understand people's emotional needs and struggles, and ready to be supportive. Okay, that's the mindset we approach situations with. The S style goes into situations with a receptive mindset. They're ready to stay open to others' ideas. They're listening. They're willing to compromise, and also willing to set aside their own needs and preferences so that others can get their needs met. Okay, and then the composed mindset. This is the SC scale. Okay, they go into situations ready to reflect before acting. They're going to moderate their responses, even under stress, and they're going to exercise diplomacy. All right, they're always ready to do that. The objective mindset is the C style. Okay, so they're going to separate facts from emotions and want to keep the discussion focused on logic, and that's where their mind is focused when they're in the situation. Okay, now remember, I've been saying situations here, and this is the main difference between the Agile EQ profile and the workplace profile. Right, the workplace profile is also about being adaptable, adapting to different people, but you're focusing on the style of the other person and how you need to adapt the communication to that person. In the Agile EQ profile, we're focusing on situations and the mindset you go into situations with. All right. So as you can imagine, there are times when your natural approach, your natural mindset isn't going to work. All right. And the way I've illustrated this with groups, I remember doing a session on the Agile EQ profile for a group of CEOs, and most of the guys in the group were a D style, at least more than half of them were. And I said, so how many of you got a D style? And they put up their hand. And I said, have any of you ever been told that you need to listen more? All right, because the mindset that's most difficult for the D style is going to be the receptive mindset. They just looked at each other and laughed. They've been told all their lives that they need to listen more than likely, if they're a strong D style. Okay, so that's the model, and they're the mindsets. Okay, and so I'm going to dive now into your strengths, and this is where we dive into the actual meat of the profile more. And you can see where my dot sits, and you can see that the 3 mindsets closest to my dot have been bolded, and the other 5 are not bolded. Okay, they're the ones that are outside my comfort zone, but we're going to come to that in the next section. So the profile goes into detail on each of the 3 mindsets that are closest to my dot as being my EQ strengths. So we'll see a summary of each of those 3 here, all right, and what the strengths do. It'll also talk about your effect on others. And then this is a really important piece here, your needs to feed your strengths. Why do you use these mindsets? Why are you gravitating towards those? And the reason is because they satisfy your needs. All right, so you look at the needs here, the need to connect with others, to be helpful and supportive, to create a harmonious environment, and to be accepted. So if I go into situations with an empathizing, receptive, and outgoing mindset, I am more likely going to get those needs met. All right, but different styles have different needs, and so they use different mindsets. Okay, but the profile will actually then dive into these a bit more, and I'm not going to go into this in a lot of detail. You'll see there's a narrative description there about how being an empathetic person affects the way you operate and the way you go into situations, and what being empathizing allows me to do. But it also points out that I may run into trouble, particularly if I do things like regularly minimize my own needs to attend to the needs of others, and so on. Okay. If we get stuck in our mindsets that are most comfortable for us and go into situations where that doesn't work, then the situation isn't going to work for me. All right. I might run into trouble. Okay. And so that will take us into the next section. And there's the same information now for each of the three mindsets that are my strengths. Okay. And the other thing I should mention when I'm in here is just like all of the other everything DiSC profiles, there's a shaded area around the dot, and that's the area I'm most comfortable operating in. And there's no extra shading here. All right, now on almost every other everything DiSC profile, I have extra shading on the DI scale. Okay, up here, but in the Agile EQ profile, there is no such thing as extra shading. But we'll see what we get instead of that when we get into the next section. All right, so this section here focuses on my strengths. Okay, I'm receptive and I'm outgoing. And now I'm ready to look outside my comfort zone. So we go to the next section of the profile, all right, beyond your comfort zone. And now we're going to look at the 5 mindsets that are not my 3 strengths. Okay, and so it's going to talk to me about those, increasing my awareness of what those mindsets are, and starting to look at when might I need to use those mindsets. And then later on, we'll look at, well, when I need to use one of those mindsets, how do I go about doing it? How do I adapt and stretch myself to do that? Okay. Now you'll see the little top of a curve down the bottom of my screen there. And it's going to, when I move this down a little bit further, that little needle is going to move. All right. So this is my profile telling me about the composed mindset, and it's going to tell me how much effort does it take me to use it. All right. So I got up a little further, and the needle swings around, and it's between yellow and pink there, meaning that it's going to take me a fair bit of effort to use the composed mindset. All right. Because I'm much more prone towards the empathizing and receptive mindsets. All right. Now, where's this meter coming from? When you respond to the Agile EQ Profile questionnaire, you do the basic questions that measure where your dot goes, but you answer additional questions that are similar to the other profiles that have priority questions. All right, so all of the profiles have priorities around the outside, except Agile EQ, which has mindsets. And the questions that you were asked when you answer this question, how comfortable are you doing such and such? In other words, I was asked questions about how comfortable I was being composed. All right, and my answers reflected that I wasn't very comfortable. All right, and hence the needle goes around to almost into the pink zone. Okay, and then the next piece is, well, why should I be composed? Why should I use a composed mindset? And here are some situations where I might need to do that. So for each of these 5 mindsets that are outside my comfort zone, I also have a little video. Now, if you've got the workplace profile facilitator kit, you'll remember Tom. And so Tom's going to talk to us about what it's like using a composed mindset and the value it brings to him. All right. So I'm not going to show, there's 5 of these videos, so I'm not going to go through those here. But there's a lot of little videos in Catalyst, and these can really help people get a better understanding of these other mindsets and when I should perhaps use them. Okay. All right. So now we get out to the objective mindset. And again, the effort meter is going to tell me that I'm actually even worse at the objective mindset than I am at the composed mindset. I'm right round into the pink. I don't quite get to the red, but obviously it's going to take a fair bit of effort for me to be objective, to put emotions aside and keep the discussion focused on logic. That's because my emotions kick in all the time. Okay, I've learned to manage it to some extent, obviously. Why should I use the objective mindset? And it explains some situations where I might need to do that. And again, we have a little video, and again, you might recognize Dante here, who's the C-style person in the workplace profile videos. So we continue on down and we get to the resolute mindset. And again, this is the one that's directly opposite me. This is the DiSC style, all right? So you can expect that the meter, the little needle there is going to go a fair way around, right? And it does. Come on. Yep. Round into the pink again. So those three mindsets that we've been through, they're composed, objective, and resolute, are the three that are going to take the most effort for me, all right? Again, why do it in situations where I might need to be? And here we have an actor who's going to talk to us about the resolute mindset. And as they have with their other videos, Wiley choose actors to make these videos who have done a profile, and their profile matches the profile that they're representing in the videos. Okay, so they're talking from personal experience. All right. The self-assured mindset, not so bad at that, just touching on the green there. Okay, I've learned to manage that one a little bit better. Why should I do it? And I might need to be self-assured when, and obviously the types of situations where D-style behavior would also be a valuable thing to do. And so we've got Sally, and if you remember Sally from the workplace videos, she's the classic D-style person who's telling us about the self-assured mindset and how she goes about that. All right. And then the last one is the dynamic mindset. All right. And this is where adaptability comes in. As you can see here, the needle hardly moves here, and I'm in the strong dark green area. So it's quite comfortable for me to use this dynamic mindset, which sort of fits with my extra action priority in the workplace profile on the DI scale. But again, the degree to which the needle moves is based on how I answered the questions when I was taking the assessment. And the question is about how comfortable am I doing this? Okay, why should I use it? I might need to be dynamic when, etc. And I tend to do a lot of that quite naturally. Maybe I learned at some stage, but and again we have a different actor here for this one. All right. So the benefit of this outside your comfort zone section is raising awareness about the options for other mindsets that might be beneficial to me, and looking at why I should do it and situations where I might need to do it. And then typically at this point in a workshop, you would get participants to choose which one of those 5 that are outside your comfort zone do you think you would benefit most by being better at? All right. And so then we dive into developing your EQ. Okay. So again, we now go into each of the 5 mindsets. And again, we have the effort meter, and it's already moved up there to the same spot it did in the previous section. But now we're going to look at how do we get into this mindset? Okay. And in order to get into this mindset and stay there, I may need to fight thoughts like, I can't believe they care so little about my feelings. I just want this to be over, etc. Okay. And these little statements here are designed around you and your style. Okay. So when I read through these things, that's exactly the kind of thing that's going to be going on in my head when I'm thinking about getting into a more composed mindset. So I need to fight those thoughts. And so where should I start? So then it gives me some things that I could try to become more composed. And it also shows me how much difficulty I'm likely to have, again, based on how I responded to those how comfortable will I be questions that I responded to in taking the profile. And I can see that creating a space between the stressor and your response is the one that's going to be most challenging for me. So I can then say, if I want to work on that one, I'll select that and it'll come up with some tips for me, things that I can do to make sure I create that space. All right. Again, we go into the objective mindset, and again, the needle will come around, and again, how to get into this mindset and what thoughts do I need to fight off when it comes to being more objective. All right. And where should I start? And again, we have things that we can work on here. Let's go to the resolute mindset. And again, how do I get into that? In order to show resolve, I need to come over thoughts like. I'm not going to fight this because I want to be a team player. It's so much easier to just give them what they want. I can recall many times where I've had thoughts been going through my mind, and so these thoughts are quite normal, okay, and it may take some time to work on them. But being more aware of these thoughts, having them there in my profile to remind me that I need to focus on dealing with these thoughts, okay. Where should I start? And if I look down through here, stand behind your opinions, even if they're unpopular, is the one that's going to maybe be more difficult for me. And probably because of my need to be liked. Okay. So sticking to your decisions and viewpoints can be difficult, right? But do the people who disagree with me genuinely have insight into the situation that I don't have? Am I truly convinced by the opposing arguments and not just giving in to avoid unpleasantness? So all of these things are going to help me to be much more effective in standing my ground and being more resolute and actually come out with an action plan. And I think when we're coming up with these action plans, it's important to choose a situation where I can do that. For example, do I have a meeting coming up where I know there's going to be some opposing thoughts? And what's it going to be about, and what are my views, what are my opinions that I really need to stand by, okay, and to come up with actual words, things that I can say to remind myself to be fully prepared to deal with the situation that is going to be more challenging for me, okay. I'm going to be much more prepared for the meeting if I do that. Right, same thing for self-assured. All right, to be self-assured, you may need to guard against thoughts like these. If I keep pushing, people are going to get angry. Oh, I would hate that. And I can really relate to that when pushing too hard for my weight might seem selfish to me or rude, okay, until my natural tendency would be to back off. Okay, so where do I start? I don't really think I have a problem with delegating. So that's something I've learnt to do. But I think addressing interpersonal problems that I would typically live with or ignore is something that I might struggle with. Okay, so that's one I could come up with some action plans that identify a situation where I could actually use this and plan for it. What am I going to say? How am I going to deal with it? When I get pushback, what am I going to do? Okay. And then the dynamic mindset, obviously, I tend to use that quite a bit. I don't think a lot of these thoughts would relate to me, but you've got to personalize the profile to yourself. Okay. So that's the Agile EQ profile. All right. It's 3 sections. Section 1 is about awareness of the model and then understanding your strengths. We're going to go back to your strengths. Right. And I really want to remind you about this needs that feed your strengths. Okay. If you've been on any training program that Integra has run about DiSC or taken you through a DiSC profile, been exposed to the whole person concept or iceberg model, right? And the reason we use that model is to emphasize that DiSC is a needs-driven behavioral model, right? People use the behavioral style that they use the behaviors that they use in order to satisfy their psychological needs that are buried down at the bottom of the iceberg, okay? The reason people use the mindsets that they use is in order to satisfy their psychological needs. And we finally have a profile that actually spells that out for people. So in terms of self-awareness, the more aware I am of the way in which I approach situations, the mindsets that I'm naturally strong in and that I tend to go with, and I go with them because they satisfy my needs. I also need to be aware of the options that are outside my comfort zone, all right? And in order to use those options, I may need to stretch myself. And stretching myself is going to be uncomfortable. And the reason it's going to be uncomfortable is because I'm going to feel like I'm not going to get my needs met, right? And I'm probably not going to get those needs met. But in actual fact, the better I am at stretching and using different mindsets, the more effectively I'm going to connect with other people, and the more likelihood I'm going to be accepted by others because I've got a broader range of skills. All right. And so the self-management or self-regulation competency that Daniel Goleman talks about is that ability to adapt, to stretch yourself, to be more emotionally intelligent. Okay. And the Agile EQ profile is a very powerful tool for helping people see that. They can see what the mindsets are, they can see what's outside their comfort zone, and then they can learn through the exercises in the profile to stretch themselves to use those other mindsets and therefore become more effective. All right. As I said at the outset, the Agile EQ profile is suitable for anyone in the organization. All right. And it's a perfect follow-on to using the workplace profile. Workplace profile helps them understand themselves and other people and how to adapt to communicate and relate to other people more effectively. The Agile EQ profile helps them understand how they deal with situations. And when they're going into a situation like a meeting, what mindset do I need to be ready to use in that meeting based on what the topic is and who's going to be in the meeting and how important the meeting is. Well, if you have any questions that come up afterwards, contact our team. support@integro.com.au is the email address. 1-800-222-902 is our phone number. And thanks for joining me today.